extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. Is there anything we should revisit there, or do you want to dive right into the next set of topics?
No, I think we did a decent job hitting the big wave tops on some of those other topics, and we could always dig much more in depth, but we got tons more questions to ponder as we go through. So I say we just dive in with some new stuff. We think.
Let's do it. Yeah, I know we wanted to talk about Herzberg. Really interesting theory to me because he talks about motivators and hygiene factors, and that's not like washing your hands after you go to the bathroom. It's like things that demotivate us if they're there, but don't motivate us if they're not. So, for example, not getting enough pay. If you're not paid enough, like you're demotivated. But if you get more pay than you need, you don't necessarily, it doesn't fire you up. You're just like, yeah, I'm paid enough. It doesn't motivate you, but it does demotivate you if it's not present. Same like if you have a boss who's yelling at you. Like if that's the case, you are probably highly demotivated. That would be a terrible place to work. But if you work in a place where your boss doesn't yell at you, you're not like, oh my God, I'm so motivated, I'm not being yelled at. You're just like, good, this is like what it should look like. What should we add there in terms of what they are? And then I'm curious what you think about it.
Yeah, like we were talking about, I found it really interesting going through his concept of that, the opposite of dissatisfied, not being satisfied. Like, it's not satisfaction, it's just not dissatisfaction. So I had to think about that for a little bit. Um, and you gave a really great example of what that means. Like the, I start to look at it in looking at barriers and friction, right? Those are kind of some other things. I'd like to hear your thoughts on what the relationship is, because it seems like there's a lot of correlation with what we talked about last week with barriers and those things being, you know, part of hygiene factors and things that you can kind of address to maybe not, like you said, motivate people, but just at least not demotivate them and result in dissatisfaction with their current work setting. Uh, the concept of salary and pay as kind of a either satisfaction, dissatisfaction. Um, that one's kind of interesting as I started going through and thinking about it a little bit more and how that relates to like an extrinsic or intrinsic motivator originally, right? Originally, it would be an extrinsic motivator, but how you can look at that and like a new job setting for a new job, like you're leaving one job, going to another one. It might be a fantastic, a great um, extrinsic motivator and reason why you're going to do that. And then all of a sudden, it just becomes the normal. And the next job that you look for, maybe salary isn't really a big thing, and you actually want to take a pay cut because the job will be more fulfilling. Um, so that was kind of interesting to me looking at it and how Herzberg kind of put it in the hygiene category. So I've just been kind of ruminating on that a little bit. I think I threw out like three different concepts or something for you in a little salvo. So what do you think about that one?
Yeah, I'll pick up the satisfaction, dissatisfaction quickly because last night in my PhD class, one of my classmates presented on a model that she built using linear regression, trying to identify factors that lead to satisfaction at work or dissatisfaction. But when I was thinking about it, like when we work with a government client, they're very satisfied. Like no one is leaving their job, no one's searching for other roles. They are happy to be where they are, but they're not motivated. They're not seeking out new problems and challenges. They're not learning and developing like all of the intrinsic motivators that we talk about. They're kind of just like, I get what I need in this job, and that's all I really care about. And I've heard that from younger generations too. Like work is where I go to make my money, and then I go elsewhere to be motivated, have fun, find meaning in life. To me, that doesn't jive. Like I want my work to be purposeful, um, but it does to a lot of people. So I'm curious what you think the difference between satisfaction, because that is a marker of a high performing team, like people are satisfied, and motivation, which is also a marker of a high performing team. People are going out of their way to perform at a higher level.
Yeah, and looking at that one, I was curious initially with the concept of just definitions and words using it. And originally, the place that I went to was that satisfaction or dissatisfaction, before digging into Herzberg stuff, was kind of a result of the motivator, right? You're motivated to do something, and then this is where it kind of builds upon itself and either fuels you or doesn't. Um, if you achieve what you wanted to do, right, you're satisfied, which gives you motivation, could perpetuate the cycle possibly. Um, was kind of where I was going. But then at the same time, if you're motivated to do something, you're not happy with the outcome, right? Then you're dissatisfied, which kind of kills the motivation, again, depending on what your personality is. And that's one thing that I keep coming back to all of these things that will be kind of a sidebar that we can attack later on. But just the individual nature and how personality, background, experiences for each individual person play to how they're motivated and what the motivation does for them. But one thing I was looking at was like you're motivated to run a 5K, right? So we'll use that as an example. You're motivated because it's like you're anticipating that it's going to be a great experience, it's going to be a beautiful day, you're outside. But by the time you're running, you get into a flow state for a little while, and then when you finally cross the finish line, it's not in the time that you were expecting, right? You took that motivational experience and you are dissatisfied with your performance. Whereas if you beat your time or the time that you wanted to, you're completely satisfied. All of this stuff builds. You're ready for the next one. You're super pumped up for the next round of training, those sorts of things. So that's kind of where I went with the satisfaction and dissatisfaction, as opposed to the hygiene factors and those sorts of things. I'll
That's,
pause there if you got a comment.
that's such a fascinating example. So as you're talking, I'm thinking a couple of things. Satisfaction or dissatisfaction is kind of like a pull motivation almost. Like if there are a lot of hygiene factors that aren't met in a job, it's going to motivate me to leave. I'm dissatisfied. If I'm satisfied, like there's no pull, but there's no push either in terms of motivation. If I'm motivated, then I'm pushed. And I think what's really, it's not an either or function, right? Like you can have powerful motivators, for example, running Karen leadership. Like we're not making millions and millions of dollars and having all those satisfaction factors, right? But it is powerfully motivating to have purpose and be learning all of the time and be a community with other people that I respect and like to work with. So you have like always this mix of dissatisfaction, satisfaction, and motivation that gives you a net push or pull, or just maybe you're in a government job and you're happy with that and there's no push or pull, you're just satisfied. You're just where you are. What I like about your 5K example is we forget that like the motivations change over the course of that time, right? You're challenging yourself, you're out with other people, you're having a great time, you're intrinsically motivated. You might even be in flow, you're just running in the moment, high intrinsic motivation. There is extrinsic motivation too, like yeah, I want to get a good time, like I'd like to maybe place or be able to, text my spouse, like I got under whatever time, I met my goal. You have that goal driven motivation. And what I think is fascinating about your example is you cross the finish line, all this intrinsic motivation, you're having this wonderful time, you see your time, and then boom, extrinsic motivation completely takes over. It's not like, oh, well, I had a good time, I didn't quite, you're just like, that was a waste of time, I'm dissatisfied, I'm unmotivated, I can't believe I didn't get, like you fixate on that instead of all the great things that happened in the previous 15 to 30 minutes running that 5K. So I'm curious, like you talked last time about reframing. That's a beautiful place where you could reframe. And frankly, it feels a little bit like I feel kind of like a loser if I'm like, wow, I didn't meet my goal, but look at all the wonderful time I had outdoors. Like, I don't know if someone said that to me or I said that to myself, I'd be like, is that true? Or do I need to pause and work harder and meet the goal next time? Where do you sit on that?
Yeah, and that's an interesting one. Like it all gets down to that individual nature, right? How much grit, determination, drive do we as individuals have? And it goes back to like I think you and I touched on nature versus nurture in the last discussion of all of your background and adding up to how you see those sorts of things and even how you see yourself as a person, which goes to, we can spin that off into identity and how, how the type of person you identify as giving, contributing to your motivation, those sorts of things. But all do the same thing. It's one of those that when you do reframe it in those aspects, right, you'll have to reframe multiple things, not just that performance, and then oh, the fluffy, hey, well, it was such a beautiful day, and these sorts of things. And I think if you do that though, to still not be like, oh man, I'm a loser. This is the only thing that I can get out of it, right? With a larger meaning or purpose, when you reframe that, like I personally, and I believe you do as well, hence why everything that Karen Leadership does is outdoor experiential. Like the outdoors is an extremely powerful place. And even though you are having to reframe your time as a good thing, in the aspect of, well, it was a great day, the environment was good, blah, blah, it's still aligning to a higher purpose. So it might take kind of a two prong, maybe, reframing shift to get you back into that mindset. But eventually you'll run down the road, I think, and realize what that ultimate purpose that you were going for is towards.
Well, let me hit you with this because maybe there's more nuance to it. If I gave up, right? Like, oh, this kind of hurts. Like, I really wanted to get 20 minutes on my 5K, but it's just too hard. I'm going to give up. I would, and I think rightfully so, would beat myself up afterwards. Like, that was a failure without really a ton of learning associated. Like, don't give up. But hopefully, like, I figured that out by the time I'm 41. If, however, like I didn't hydrate properly before and I, had trouble running because I was dehydrated, or I didn't fuel properly, or I didn't account for the hills and they just crushed me because I've been training on flat ground, then the reframe becomes much easier. Like, okay, I need to account for the hills. So maybe there's like an internal, external locus of control aspect of this. Like if it's because I made a decision that was bad or lacked grit or discipline, I don't know. Like I would judge someone for being like, yeah, but it's sunny outside, so who cares? Potentially, if the caveat is they had a goal of like the purpose was to meet that goal, right? If their goal was to go out, have fun with friends, and enjoy the time outside, yeah, totally, that's your goal. But if there's some external lesson to be learned, then it's not really failing. It's like, okay, I need to account for hills. I need to do hill training or whatever it is. So that is, I think, a pretty big distinction in terms of whether you beat yourself up or not at the end of that race.
Yeah, absolutely, and the learning aspect of it. What was it? I think last week you and I were going back about humans being, just in general motivated in nature to do things. And I think one of the things we were talking about was, just to show that we all learned how to walk, right? And we didn't make a conscious necessary decision when we were little, whether it was extrinsic or intrinsic, whether it was your parents that were coaching you along, or whether you had an internal drive to do it. Like humans are naturally motivated to take steps forward, to do new things. And somewhere in our paths, because of whether it's Kurzweil's hygiene factors, friction, various things we run into, we start to lose those and kind of get into that rut, losing motivation. But again, to go back to the example with the running, we're all motivated by learning something, and it's reframing those negative experiences into what you're taking out of it. That if you, like you said, if you don't take that lesson, then it is a failure, 100%.
Yeah.
But as long as you learn something and get something out of it, it doesn't matter what you end up doing.
Yeah. I want to put a plug in for our programming here because it just makes sense. We reframe success as learning and conversations, not as summits for this reason. Because, I don't know, 30 to 50% of our trips, they don't succeed, right? Like, it's too big of a bite. The mountain's too big. The weather's bad. There's an ice storm. It's the mountains. Like, that's a good ratio, 50% success. Any mountaineer I trust would tell you that they fail on 50% of the mountains they try. But we're not saying, like, come with care and leadership, we're going to climb a mountain. We say, come with care and leadership, we're going to have deep, introspective, reflective conversations that are going to drive your business forward. And we do that every single time. So framing success is really important. What I'm curious about now, I keep coming back to intrinsic and extrinsic motivation because it seems so black and white. Like, you read about it, everybody's like, oh, extrinsic, bad. That's like bad leadership. Intrinsic, like good leadership. I don't think that's true. And I wonder what you think about this. The difference isn't like internal or external, it is time bound. And what I mean by that is intrinsic motivation, by definition, is being motivated by the task at hand in the moment. Learning, mastery, autonomy, having a purpose. You're enjoying doing it. You're in flow. External really is you're trying to get something external to the experience, trying to get in shape, trying to get the 5K time, trying to drive, a new revenue goal for your business in the future. And both of them can be really darn motivating. Like, you could be very intrinsically, air quote that, motivated to drive that external goal, I think, but it's extrinsic motivation because it's not linked exactly to what you're doing in the moment. And I think that's where discipline covers the gap, because you don't need discipline to be in flow, but you're just in flow because you're in the present. But the longer that gap is, like, hey, in 10 years, the vision for this business is X, Y, and Z. Like, you're going to need a dump truck load of discipline to get there because it's not going to be fun all the time. What do you think about that time distinction?
Yeah, I think the time distinction is extremely interesting and definitely meaningful. And like you were talking about with the intrinsic motivation, it's immediate, right? You're getting that immediate feedback. You're seeing the results. So there's not a whole lot of challenge going forward to continue that motivation. But I'll use an example from my past when I was working uh, on the government side. We would work projects when I was stationed back out in Washington D.C. at headquarters. We're working projects that aren't going to come to fruition until 15, 20 years from now. Right. So trying to take the team and maintain some sort of motivation when you're not going to see it, or when priorities might potentially change and completely destroy the work that you did. Um, it's kind of hard to maintain and rally the team and keep everybody motivated, keep pulling in that same direction because of that distance, right? So that's a drastic example of the time break between work and actual reward. Uh, but just to illustrate, the two ends of the spectrum from the intrinsic to far-reaching stuff. And I think in those instances, it's really valuable um, to break it down into the smaller chunks that are meaningful, right? That we are going to be able to see uh, in the next quarter or the next year, and use some of those smaller ones to build and capitalize on the gains that you've had going forward. Is it going to work every time? Absolutely not. You're going to have to reframe quite a bit. You're going to have to inject some of that external some more external motivation in at times, because you're not going to be able to see it. And then there are times where people are just going to start cranking through, and man, this is really important to them because there's a personal purpose and connection to it, and they're just going to do it, right? Even though they're not going to see that benefit for a long time, and it will be internally motivated, because that portion of it has purpose and meaning for them.
Yeah, that's so interesting because I'm
I don't
thinking
know.
about like
Yeah,
I'm thinking about op plans, right? Like if China attacks the U.S., here's like a nitty gritty detailed plan. But honestly, like no one's doing that plan hoping that they ever even use it, right? They're like, gosh, I hope we don't have to use this plan. Um, that's a really interesting example, and I think what's striking to me is like I probably personally and many people would be more motivated like working on an Excel spreadsheet because you'll get into flow, right? You have immediate feedback. There's a clear goal, and you're just jamming out numbers. You're like, oh man, I am making progress. This is awesome. Then like some really meaningful, deeply purposeful project that won't come to fruition for 10 years in the moment, right? Like my motivation, my net motivation will be higher, like doing a meaningless Excel spreadsheet. Excel is highly motivating for some personalities. We're coming up on time, and I want to hit this idea of like everyone is different that you've mentioned a couple of times. I'm on the fence. I don't know if we are. I think like we manifest how things motivate us differently, but you've also said like everybody's motivated by learning. And sometimes I don't want to say something's wrong with someone if they're not motivated by that. I have been not motivated by that in the past, but it's because those satisfaction factors, the Herzberg or hygiene factors, have just like diminished my very spirit. The U.S. Navy crushed my spirit so far that I was no longer interested in learning. But it's not because I didn't love learning. It was just I was so dissatisfied with my current state. So I'm curious, like, is everybody dramatically different, or are we all kind of the same? But like you're going to want to learn different things than me. The same thing to learn will be different, and you won't be motivated to learn some things I will be fired up by, and vice versa. But we're both interested in learning. We're both interested in accomplishing goals. We're both interested in having some locus of control that we feel like we have autonomy. What do you think? Where's the middle ground here?
yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those. It's the yes.
Perfect.
You're right. The yes
Yes,
and
and
right. It's going to be yes and 100% every time. But you hit on it perfectly with like we're all motivated to learn something. Like again, human nature, right? You're going to continually like the only time we really stop learning is when we die, right? You're even if you're sitting on the couch, you're going to learn something. Maybe it's bad, maybe it's good, but learning is still taking place no matter what you're doing. So yes, it's not individualistic, but yes, it is individualistic because, like you said, some people are really happy to work on Excel spreadsheets. I'm I can by Excel spreadsheets sometimes, but only if it's tied to a topic that is of interest to me,
yeah,
or of learning. Woodworking, I can be out woodworking and I will completely lose track of time and have no idea what's going on. And, I start at 10 o'clock in the morning and I finally open the garage door and I'm like, oh, it's midnight. Like I should have stopped this hours ago. Um, but there's somebody that would be into spreadsheets just like I am with woodworking. And they're really excited about learning those different aspects of it. So I would say, yeah, it's both. It's the middle ground, and that's the challenge of leadership within any context is finding and leveraging that learning, mastery, autonomy, all those things that we've been talking about, to get people and keep them motivated. And the one thing that I wanted to really hit on was your concept of net motivation, right? I think that is extremely important because it's not just motivation is motivation, right? That I think that net motivation is really the key going forward, and it's not just in a work setting either. I wonder about how much does personal life and your work setting influence, like is it a 60/40, is it a 80/20, what is that relationship? And I think it's dependent on people to give you that net positive motivation so that we can do that, because not only are there hygiene factors, there's hygiene factors at home too, right, that we can start to try and address as we go forward. But yeah, I just wanted to hit that net motivation, because I was thinking about this last week. Was It's extremely important, I think, that we focus on those sorts of things, because what we might not be able to capitalize on at work, maybe we can capitalize on at home. They kind of fuel us to go through the stuff at work. What do you think?
Yeah, we're coming up on time here, and now I'm thinking more, that net motivation. That's where the difference is. Like, we're all different. We don't know what's going on at home, and I think what I'm caught up on. I've taught this a million times. Everyone who's ever been in leadership will nod knowingly. Like, you have to tailor your leadership to every individual, and it just kind of lands like trite to me. Um, you don't really, like, everybody wants purpose, mastery, and autonomy. Those will motivate everyone, and you do. Like, if someone has an opportunity for autonomy or purpose or mastery, and they're not motivated, something's going on. Like, something's going on at home. There are hygiene factors at play that you're not aware of. Like, some constraint is causing them not to be motivated. It's not like, oh, like, Trevor's just different. He doesn't like autonomy. That's not true. Trevor's just dealing with a lot of crap at home and isn't going to be motivated by autonomy right now. So what can you do as a leader individually for him to get that net motivation up? So that's my, I guess, pro tip or actionable takeaway. Think about motivation as a net. Like, what are the constraints? What are the motivators? What are the satisfaction factors? And how do they all tease apart into where a person is at any given time? And then ask a lot of questions like, hey, it seems like you should be motivated, but you're not. What's going on? Because there are probably ways that you could help fix that and get, frankly, higher performance with more satisfaction from that person. I'll hand it over to you for final practical action thoughts.
Yeah, a couple of things just real quick for like stuff is, one thing, just conducting kind of a motivation audit for yourself, and just seeing, what things have contributed either positively or negatively to motivation, and digging deep into it and asking those questions like you were talking about. And then at the same point in time, to go back to kind of the race framing that we did at the very beginning, like, give yourself some grace too. Like, we're all not going to be 100% as we're going through each one of these tests, because we're all learning as we go through. And, if you're not giving yourself that grace, like, you're going to demotivate yourself. You're going to be dissatisfied with performance. When you're doing your motivation audit, you're going to get down on yourself. So those two kind of actionable things, I would say, going forward, would definitely help out as we're all, assessing how much net motivation we have going forward.
Love it. Yeah, those are both great tips. I think, and maybe this will change, but I'm curious about demotivation. Like, what burns us out? What makes us not motivated? Maybe next week we'll cover that, or maybe flow, because I know you've been looking into flow, and that's a fascinating concept too. But for now, we'll sign off, and hopefully this is a useful conversation for folks, and look forward to next week when we talk about more on motivation. Thanks, Trevor.